What a great night of Drake men's basketball that was yesterday. Holy cow. Talk about coaching adjustments, talking about players stepping up when their name is called, all of that. It was great basketball in the Valley as a whole. You had overtime thriller games, you had upsets, just a great day of sports. And then we continue it with what could be the best 5-day stretch in football history with college football playoff semifinals, NFL wild card. So much to get to. Can't wait to get to it. But first off, welcome everyone to the Media Row podcast. I'm Justin Miller and really excited to break down the Drake men's basketball victory over Bradley last night. Might be able to get this one out in time. I know I put out on social media how we were worried with some scheduling conflicts that this podcast might be out a little later. It looks like we should be able to get it out, if not right at 2, not far from it. So that's exciting. Some really cool news in the works here in the next couple of weeks I can't wait to share with everyone. And just a really great start to 2025 so far. And let's just jump right into it. So the Drake Bulldogs head into Peoria where they take on the Missouri Valley leading Bradley Braves. And Drake, riding that 2-game losing streak, haven't looked the same since basically that loss to UIC. And Bradley is a team that was 4-0 in the conference and was as deep as any team in the Valley at this moment. They didn't lose much in the offseason. They kept their head coach. It's hard to do that in the Valley, as Indiana State and Drake knows. It's hard to keep players in the transfer portal. That's for any conference. Bradley's been able to do that. So all the numbers were pointing to Bradley winning this game. And I talked to people about it. I knew Coach McCollum would have this team competitive for the most part. I did think, to be honest, hand up, I thought Bradley was going to win that game. And I wouldn't have been shocked if it was an ugly loss too. Just with their size, their depth, and then their speed. There was multiple things I was concerned about going into that game, how Drake would handle the pressure that Bradley would be able to put on them, and we'll get into the numbers and how Coach McCollum was able to adjust, but just kudos to the Drake Bulldogs taking down Bradley on the road 64-57. It snaps a 2-game losing streak for the Bulldogs. Drake now has not had a 3-game losing streak since 2021-22 season, where they did it twice that season. But they have not lost 3 in a row since, 4 years ago. So just talking about the growth of this program in these last handful of years. And, in a year where picked to be kind of in the middle of the Valley, you bring in a brand new head coach, you bring in all those Division II transfers, you don't know what to expect, and there's been no fall off. And I was expecting to see Drake kind of get exposed on the road against a tough Bradley team, but Drake continues to just take control over Bradley. They've won now 5 straight over the Bradley Braves, which is a huge shock to me. When Dave Snell, who we talked to yesterday, the play-by-play announcer for Bradley, when he brought up that stat, I even was like, well, that doesn't seem right. I know Bradley won at home against Roman Penn and those guys, and that was 2 years ago. I swear they would have won one at home at least, because Peoria is a tough place to play, and Bradley fans are a different breed. I remember for the Arch Madness tournament in 2023, going down there, and I went down, of course, Tuesday, got to the arena on Wednesday to watch the first round games, and everyone was like, well, the first few games, like Thursday and stuff like that, the crowds won't be crazy, but then you'll see Bradley take over, kind of end of Friday and definitely over the weekend if they're still involved. If they're still surviving and advancing. Bradley fans show up. And last night they were loud. It was a good show out by Drake, though, too. And that's been a huge benefit of just these past few years. It shows you what happens when you win. Because I remember as a kid, you would watch games and you maybe see a speckle of blue on road games, and now like they're taking up sections, and that's awesome. I love it, and the team needs it, especially in a hard-fought game like last night. But so Drake starts off slow again. Let's just start breaking down this first half, and that first half kind of went how I thought the game would. Drake has been known and has been consistently showing these past few games that they don't start off fast by any means. Drake shot 2 of 10 to start the game, while Bradley utilized their size and speed. They were doing what they needed to do. You're getting Hannah involved, which, man, Darius Hannah, how do you guard that guy? Drake ended up, making adjustments to guard him better, but he is 6'10", a forward that can shoot the 3 ball, so you have to get up on him, but he has speed, and he actually dribbles the ball pretty well, has good ball handling. One of the first scores he had in the night was he's on the right wing, Abreu comes up to guard him, he does a little pump fake, drives with the right hand, lays it up. And that's when I think I put out a tweet where I was like, Hannah, how do you guard that guy? He's a good passer too. And that Bradley team, again, is stacked. You have Thomas. You have Dean, who's one of the best point guards. You have Montgomery, who led Bradley with 17 points last night. And so there's just so many factors, X factors, on that Bradley team. And Drake started off slow. They gave up 3 quick 3-pointers to Bradley. They shot 3 of 4 to start. And then, but even through all that, Drake continued to just be scrappy, and they continued to just hang around. They were never getting blown out. They would cut it to like 3, and then Bradley would go on a run where it'd be back up to 7-point lead. But Drake continued to hang around. And then Coach McCollum took 2 quick timeouts, and that's where he saw the adjustments. So he takes 2 quick timeouts, and all of a sudden, Drake ends the first half on an 8-2 run. They're getting production out of everyone when Sturtz was getting held basically scoreless. His only points coming at the free throw line. You're having people step up. And the defense, they got physical. They were playing smooth. Mascari I've been critical of Mascari's defense. And it's not bad defense. It's just more Sturtz is at a different level defensively. I think there's a lot of players defensively on Drake that are just really strong. And Mascari's good. But last night, I think he was better than he usually is. He was reading passing lanes a lot better, tipping the ball, getting inside and forcing turnovers, or just forcing difficult shots too. Because sometimes he gets caught up on ball screens and goes under ball screens, leaving open threes, and it's tough, the position he's at and the people he has to guard, because like Dave Snell said, there's a lot of really good guards in this conference, and you're putting Mascari to guard him most of the time. So I thought his defense was really good towards the end of that first half and most of the second half. And that was what was so impressive. Coach McCollum making the right adjustments. The main things I was worried about going into last night was Bradley's ability to hit the 3-pointer, their size and their speed, but then also Drake needing more from guys not named Bennett Sturtz. How will Coach McCollum deal with a Bradley team that can, play 11 guys, and Drake, who usually runs with a 7-man rotation? How will he manage time for players? And he did all of that. He was able to adjust and make Drake competitive out there with Bradley by changing a few things up. In the second half, his defensive strategy to hold them accountable at the 3-point line definitely worked. Bradley 0 of 11 from deep and only 9 of 26 from the field. They forced turnovers, and then they took advantage of those turnovers, something we didn't see them do against UIC and against Murray State, but they forced 17 turnovers and had 15 points off of them. And then the biggest one, I think Coach McCollum has found his rotation with guys like Isaiah Howard, who in these last 2 games, averaging about 7 points a game. Before the Murray State game, Howard had 12 points in total. Then he scores 13 against Murray State. And then he puts up 8 last night, shot 4 of 7. And his rebounding is what has been so impressive. His ability to get in, battle for offensive boards. He's really talented on defense. And again, reminder to everyone, Isaiah Howard's only a freshman. So we're seeing this growth over a short period of time when he still has 3 more years to really progress. And Coach McCollum has been proven to build players and improve players. So I'm really excited to see where his ceiling's going to be at. So you have Isaiah Howard come off the bench. He helps out. Nate Ferguson had a good game. And then you have Tavion Banks, who puts up a career night, scoring 19 points. And going into this game, everyone was worried about the depth issue of Drake, and the adjustments and the lineup changes and the rotations, bringing people in and out by McCollum, clearly worked. The Drake bench outscored Bradley 44-12. That's the reason Drake wins that game. Especially when Bennett Sturts only had 4 points, didn't make a single field goal. That's the reason. You had guys step up when they needed to. And it was just outstanding coaching and outstanding execution from the Drake Bulldogs. And like I said, Mitch Muscari he was due. It had been a while since we had seen him really play consistently well for a full 40 minutes since Kansas State. And he puts up 4 of 10 from deep, scores 12 points. He hadn't hit 4 3-pointers or more in a game since December 17th against Kansas State. But he was due. And, man, they're not easy threes by any means. He gets the ball with about 2 seconds left on the shot clock and usually has to heave it up around the coach's box area, about 25 feet. And he's got a smooth release, a high release too. That ball, it's a high arcing shot. So it's hard to guard. And hit one early on in the first half, and you could just see his confidence get growing. When I watch Muscari, it is that cliche of a good shooter just needs to see the ball go in once. And when he hadn't scored in double figures in a while. He put up 9 against Murray State and hit a few big shots late, but again, wasn't consistent. In this game, he showed up, and that's huge from a veteran, a graduate student, a guy who had a full-time job lined up in Chicago before McCollum decided to leave Northwest Missouri State. And then McCollum calls him and says, "You should come with me to Des Moines." And he leaves his full-time job and goes play because he has 1 more year of eligibility as a graduate. And he goes and plays for Drake. And you just see that veteran leadership. He's directing guys on trap and on defense. And I was really impressed again with his defensive ability, getting into passing lanes. And then another big thing I was concerned about, but you can tell Coach McCollum in practices was very adamant of Drake controlling the glass. Dave Snell said on Wednesday he was confident Bradley was going to control the glass, which why wouldn't you be? Drake isn't a big team. Bradley, with depth, they have guys over 6'10". I was with Dave. I was like, yeah, that's right. I think Bradley controls the glass. Drake out-rebounds Bradley 30-27. And the only downside of this whole game was kind of the backcourt matchup. I was really excited to see Duke Dean, who's one of the best point guards in the league and can create a bunch of different shots, how he would play going up against Bennett Sturts, who, again, is one of the few guys in the Valley leading his team in points, rebounds, and assists. And both defenses just had a way of taking them out. I mean, Duke Dean, I think, only put up 5 points. Like we said, Sturtz only 4 points, didn't hit a single field goal. All of his points were at the free throw line, and he missed a few free throws too, which was very rare. But yeah, that was the only disappointing part of that game. Was I was really excited for that backcourt matchup, and both defenses just played too good. Duke Dean, nowhere to be found. Montgomery, though, stepped up big. Hannah played well. This Bradley team's going to be okay. This isn't a devastating loss, and even if Drake would have lost this game, now depending on how they lost, if it was a close loss, you don't feel bad about it playing in Peoria. Now, if it was an ugly loss, like I had this weird gut feeling that it could have been, then you have a different feeling, of course, leaving that game. But a huge just confidence boost for the Drake Bulldogs, who had lost 2 tough ones on the in a row. And then Bradley, now you drop to 4-1, and we just have madness in the Valley where there's 7 teams at 3-2. Bradley's still on top with a 4-1 record, but Drake now starting to look like they can figure some things out, clean some of their mistakes up. But it's not going to get easier. Playing at Indiana State's going to be tough. Illinois State is always tough. Southern Illinois is not a good team, and I bet you Drake plays them close. It's the same as Valpo. Valpo can be in the bottom of the league, and on the road, Drake will struggle. And maybe that's just recency bias because the last 2 years it's felt like Drake has struggled when they play Southern Illinois, but it's not going to get easier. And on Saturday, Drake returns to Des Moines to play Evansville. And Evansville, a team that everyone likes to joke about in the Missouri Valley. I mean, you're seeing burner accounts on Twitter. You know, Evansville did this. If they hold the team to less than 65 points, every fan gets a free taco or whatever it was. And you have burner accounts that focus on the Missouri Valley on Twitter talking about what if you hold yourself to under 65, which is very funny. But this Evansville team is looking pretty legit. They played Illinois State and took down Illinois State by 10. They've won 2 of their last 3 and won by 18, actually. Sorry. Won by 18 over Illinois State. Illinois State's a 10-win team. But this Evansville team isn't going to be a walkover. I really hope, Drake, though, I just think in terms of what it would do confidence-wise, if they can just have an easy win, that would be huge. After an emotional, tough battle against Bradley, come back home, give the home fans something to cheer for, and just dominate and take down Evansville that is playing well, but you're a better team than Evansville. I fully believe that. Then that just does a bunch for your confidence. So Drake improves to 13-2, beating Bradley 64-57. 3-2 now in the Valley and right back into the mix. If you lose that one, it's a tough uphill climb because, yeah, the must-win games are in March, but it doesn't make it any easier losing that game against Bradley. And then you also want to stack yourself up and see where you compare against the best in your conference. And Drake beat them on their home court. So really excited to see how this team comes out now after getting that win back, getting back into the win column, seeing what your team can do when things are clicking, and the adjustments Coach Mack made. Really excited to see what he does against Evansville. Saturday at 5 o'clock. Make sure to follow us on Media Row Pod. Follow me on Twitter as well at Justin_C Miller, because it will be I will be, doing highlights and thoughts and interviews with Coach Mack afterwards as usual. So make sure you follow along. Like we said, big day in the Missouri Valley last night. The 2 games that I said were must-watches outside of the Drake Bradley game lived up to the hype. Starting off with Murray State and UNI. Murray State is figuring something out offensively. It'd be interesting to talk to Steve Prohm and say what's clicking these last 2 weeks. This is a good offensive team at the early part of the season, but then they kind of went through a lull. And all of a sudden, now it's back to clicking. They hit 12 3-pointers last night. The Drake game, where they shot over 50% from the field, was only the third time they did it all year long. They just did it again last night against a good UNI team on the road. They shot 55% from the field, 57% from three, and they had 4 players with 10-plus points. And this Racers backcourt is legit, even though they have a guy at like 6'8" playing guard, which I know that's just basketball these days, but I still see that on the depth chart. I still like scratch my head and go, that's a forward. But Prohm is figuring something out with Murray State. They have been playing really well offensively. Defense is getting better too. They're causing headaches from beyond the arc. UNI is not a outstanding 3-point shooting team, but they're a good 3-point shooting team. And at home, you wouldn't expect them only to hit 4 threes. That's the second time they've done that this year. Only once they've hit under 4. But looking at the box score, you had UNI and had 4 players that put up 10 plus. And that was my big key. I said, if you get someone other than Titan Anderson, much like how I talk about Drake, if you just get more help, this team beats Murray State at home. But Murray State, their offense is just clicking, and now they're causing headaches from behind the arc. And UNI, the 3-point shot wasn't falling, and it makes it really difficult to win games. They still had a chance. They hit a layup with about a minute to go, but then Murray State came back down the court and scored and put the game away. But they had the lead there in the final minute. UNI was so close. I'm really excited to see these two teams play again later this season. So Murray State taking down UNI. Then in the other game that I said was a must-watch was Valpo going up against Indiana State. This was one where I didn't know who to pick because, yes, I know Valpo at home is really talented. They were 8-3 at home, I think, coming into the game, or 7-3, around that mark. And we've seen how they've caused headaches to the Missouri Valley's, some of their best teams. Bradley struggled against Valpo. Drake struggled against Valpo. UNI lost to the Beacons. So it wasn't going to be an easy win by any means for Indiana State. But my biggest concern was I knew Valpo's defense was going to be legit because it has been all season long, at home at least. But I was worried about their offensive production because that's been their kryptonite, is their defense can only do so much when the offense isn't putting up points and isn't being efficient, isn't moving the ball around. And for Valpo, their offense showed up. They had 3 guys with over 20-plus points as they took down Indiana State 98-96 in an overtime thriller. And Indiana State, they had a few guys in double figures. But again, they hit 7 threes, but missed 17 of them, 7 of 24. It's not terrible, but it's not great. And you have a Valpo team that was really able to do what they wanted offensively. So Valpo wins that one in a thriller, in a game that those two lived up to the hype. I was so worried with me hyping up the backcourt matchup of Drake and Bradley with Dean and Sturts. I was so nervous I was going to hype that up. And then when that one wasn't going well, I was like, oh no. I'm going to hype up this Indiana State Valpo game, and that one's going to be a blowout for one team. And then same with UNI Murray State. Both lived up to the hype. Very fun games to watch. And like we said, the standings right now for the Missouri Valley, anyone's league. And it makes it really fun. Now, there's positives and negatives when you have a conference like this where it's anyone's conference. The biggest negative is it makes it really difficult to get 2 teams come March into the tournament. Because, I mean, people joked about it. Drake was a preseason top 5 team in the Missouri Valley, and they lost their head coach, their best player, and basically all their players and all their staff. And they were a top 5 Missouri Valley team. A lot of Missouri Valley teams lost their coaches, lost a few players. Bradley was able to retain most of theirs, but Indiana State loses their head coach and best player. But so while it's fun in these months, and it'll make for a really fun trip into St. Louis in early March, it does come with some consequences, and the biggest one being I don't see this being a too big conference. And I think a lot of people know that going into the season. I think last year when Indiana State was snubbed out after losing in a battle in the conference championship to Drake, that was kind of the moment where I sat there and went, okay, you just have to win your conference title. It's going to be really hard for you to get in. It's possible. Drake did it in 2020 where they were 18-0 and were one of the first 4 teams and beat Wichita State in that first 4 matchup, but then lost to USC in the first round. It's possible, but I'm just saying, while it's really fun to look at and you see the 7 teams tied at 3-2, it's going to be really hard to get 2 teams in. It comes with some consequences, but it makes for a really fun conference season. In January, we're only, 9 days into January, and we're having chaos. We're having overtime games. College basketball needs to get better at scheduling their games. I saw last night, 25 of the 30 Division I games last night were all starting at 7 because you had Drake at 6. You had UNI Murray State at 6. And then you had Indiana State Valpo at 7, on top of a bunch of other big games at 7. The only game I was able to watch where I was like, oh, I don't have to worry about double boxing it, was that Oklahoma Texas A&M game. But that one started late at 8 o'clock. And I get it, it's a weeknight, but come on, college basketball. You can do a little better, I think, on scheduling games. But also, those are predetermined, I think, so it makes it tough. So I get there's a balance to it. It just, viewer-wise, it just make every week like March Madness. Have games starting at 11. People at work watching college basketball all day, hell yeah. So, Missouri Valley, we'll get into more of tomorrow, kind of what to expect with Drake Evansville. The Drake women play tomorrow at Bradley, so we'll talk about that game too, as the Drake women have had a nice few days off after winning 7 in a row. Coach Pullman getting her 80th win. But tomorrow will definitely be NFL wildcard college football playoff heavy, as tonight we have our first college football playoff semifinal between Notre Dame and Penn State. The 7th seed Notre Dame Irish taking on number 6 Penn State. Right now, money is landing on the Fighting Irish. They're favored by 1. And that seems about right. I think this is going to be a tough battle game on both sides. Teams are very similar. I think Drew Aller has been impressive in these 2 games. I think Penn State's offensive line and defensive line has been impressive. Notre Dame's offensive and defensive linemen have really impressed me. Their ability to cause turnovers. This is going to be a battle, and I can't wait to watch it. But Penn State will finally be tested after they've been given the easiest path to a college football playoff semifinal ever. And they got it for losing. Penn State lost to Ohio State earlier in the year, their toughest opponent in the regular season. Penn State loses in the Big Ten championship to Oregon. Yeah, it was a tough, close game, but they lost. And they get handed Boise State. And there was no challenge. They get handed SMU. No challenge. So now I'm interested in, after seeing Penn State, just throttle these smaller teams, how will they go up against a team that actually matches up well and has been tested? I think Indiana isn't a great team, but Georgia was. Georgia was a really good team and a big team. And Notre Dame had control of that game from the start. And it's because I know every game Notre Dame is going to try to force the run. That's their bread and butter. I get that offensively. But defensively, what has been really impressive is their ability to cause turnovers and get pressure on opposing quarterbacks. They forced 3 turnovers against Georgia, and Penn State, an offensive line that has been playing well, but against smaller teams like SMU and Boise State that aren't great defensive teams, they allowed 3.5 sacks per game. And I think this Notre Dame team, if they can get pressure on Aller, who is elusive in the backfield, but if they can get pressure on Aller, make him make a few mistakes, you get those extra possessions, Notre Dame wins this game. That's what it comes down to. And I think it's going to be a tough battled game. The 1-point favorite to Notre Dame sounds about right, because I don't see this being a blowout by any means. And if you're asking me to pick a team, I'm going to lean towards who's coaching these teams. And I trust Marcus Freeman more than I do James Franklin. Marcus Freeman is 4-4 against top 10 teams. It's not great, but it's a lot better than James Franklin, who sits at 4-19 versus top 10 teams. So it's going to be a battle. It's going to be really interesting. And it's going to be a great introduction to what is going to be an awesome football weekend. So you have Penn State, Notre Dame tonight at 6:30. Tomorrow, you have Ohio State, Texas, which we will definitely break down tomorrow. And then you start NFL wildcard talks. Ravens, Steelers, which will be great. You have, you have Texans and Chargers, which will be a close game, I think. A lot of these wildcard games will be fun. So that will do it for today's show. Tomorrow, make sure to tune in around 2 o'clock, where it will be a football-heavy show. We'll still break down the Drake women, and we'll preview Drake versus Evansville on the men's side of things as well, and try to give you a Missouri Valley update before the weekend. But definitely football-heavy, and we'll recap what happens tonight between Notre Dame and Penn State. I promise I'm going to try to be better on these picks. I went, 2-4, I think, so far in this playoffs, which has been brutal. I picked Ohio State to beat Tennessee. I had Oregon beating Ohio State. I had Georgia beating Notre Dame. I think Penn State is the only team that I had moving forward into the semis that actually did. So I had Texas. I had Texas beating Arizona State. So I guess Texas and Penn State I had moving forward, but I got 2 out of the 4 wrong. So I'll try to be better on that. But a really fun show. Again, thank you so much. Like, subscribe, comment, and just support Media Row. Really excited to grow this thing. Again, have some cool news coming up in the next few weeks I'm excited to share with everyone. But follow us at Media Row Pod on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram or on Twitter at Justin_C Miller. On TikTok at Justin Miller on air. For just highlights throughout the show, for takes, for other videos, coaches' interviews. Make sure it's all there on social media. Anything Drake, Missouri Valley, or just sports in general, this is where you need to be at Media Row. I will talk to everyone again tomorrow at 2 o'clock.